Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. A talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is internationally syndicated solely due to the love and support that you all continue to give. We're available across all major distributors, and as long as you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in, because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Colonel Charles M. Bechtel. And we're going to be discussing his incredible book, Sent to War, Returning for Peace, My Reconciliation with the Vietnam War. People, listen, man. You're going to want to run to Amazon and purchase copies of this amazing book. But I got an even better place for you. Check out his personal site. That's ColonelChuckBechtel.com. And just to make sure, that's the abbreviation of Colonel. So that's going to be C-O-L, Chuck Bechtel, BECHTEL.com. There, you're going to gather more information on Chuck. More information on this fantastic book, hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. Man, I'm telling you, a one-stop shop for it all. Again, that's ColonelChuckBechtel.com. And before I go any further, I want to quickly take this opportunity and point out the fact that Chuck was brought to us by Citi of Books. So for my writers out there, if you need some assistance moving that book you just finished developing, head on over to citiofbooks.com and gather all of the ways that their fantastic team it's going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Chuck here on the line. People, I want you to envision something for me really quick. What does it take to return to the battlefield? And follow me here, not with a weapon, but with an open heart. A cliche, I get it, but something that is remarkably powerful and really something that gets to the heart of his book. Because in his book, Sent to War, Returning for Peace, Chuck doesn't just recount his harrowing days as a Vietnam draftee. He takes us on a raw, a redemptive journey back to the jungles that at one time haunted him, decades later in search of healing. This memoir, it isn't just a war story. That's going to be part of it, of course, but it is a radical act of reconciliation, a testament to the veterans who carried the weight of a very unpopular war and the citizens who helped them lay it down. We're about to unpack the moments that shattered Chuck, the people who helped put him back together, and why peace, man, sometimes peace is the hardest fight of all. Strap in, because trust me when I tell you, this conversation will challenge how you think about war, how you think about forgiveness, and the stories that we tell ourselves to survive. You're going to run on over and pick it up. I promise you, we're only going to scratch the surface here today. But my goodness, is the tip of that iceberg massive. Here we go. Chuck, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
Very good, Benji. Thank you.
Of course. Listen, man, Chuck, it is an honor to have you here. I want to start first and foremost by saying the common phrase of thank you very much for your service. And as I always tell military representatives when I say that, man, a thank you just doesn't seem good enough, Chuck. The sacrifices that you and your military brothers and sisters have made for myself and for every other individual living in this country of ours, it's just not enough, man. It's all I have to offer you at the moment, so I'm going to offer it. But I just want you to know that I understand first and foremost that it does not do justice to what you have sacrificed, man. So thank you again for your service. Most importantly, thank you for being here with us to discuss this magnificent book.
My pleasure, Benji.
Chuck, let's jump right in, man. I know one of the key figures that not only played a pinnacle role into this book's creation, but of course your particular journey. And we're gonna pay homage quickly to a Mrs. Lei Williams because she played a key role in your healing. How did meeting someone so deeply affected by the war, yet willing to bridge divides, alter your sense of responsibility?
Benji, I never intended to write a book, to be honest. The catalyst for the book was a fantastic trip back to Vietnam in June 2022 with 11 other veterans and a Vietnamese band, and of course, our outstanding leader, Lei Williams. It was a tremendous trip because of two things. First, the people on the trip. 2 Marines on the trip were badly wounded during the war. Charlie Miller was severely wounded and spent 15 months in the Philadelphia Navy Hospital. He was in the hospital when his younger brother, Jim, who joined the Marines as soon as he got out of school, went to visit him. Jim did not have to go to Vietnam since his parents had already given up one son to the cause. He said he was a Marine and not a coward, and he wanted to go, and he did. He was on patrol when they discovered some Viet Cong soldiers in a cave. His squad maneuvered against the enemy, and he got shot in the stomach. While he was holding his stomach, he jumped on an explosive device which blew him apart.
Wow.
Jim Miller sacrificed his life to save his Marines. He was awarded the Silver Star, but his Marine said he should have received the Medal of Honor. The other Marine, Lou Farganas, was shot twice on the same day. We had some real American heroes on this trip, Benji. The Vietnamese man was Chu Ban Le. He was a South Vietnamese helicopter pilot. He was on our side. On April 30, 1975, as Saigon was falling to the communists, he was flying a UE helicopter when he received a call from his headquarters to land immediately. South Vietnam had surrendered. He landed and took on a full load of fuel. He also had 26 people pile onto his helicopter. The helicopter was designed for a maximum of 13. It was seriously overloaded. But he was able to get the helicopter flying, and he flew out to the U.S. 7th Fleet, where he landed on an aircraft carrier. The helicopter was then pushed overboard to make room for more helicopters. The other essential element was our extraordinary group leader, a Vietnamese woman by the name of Mai Thi Tuot No, who would later become Mrs. Lei Williams. She was 5 years old and her sister 3 when they were put on an American helicopter as Saigon was fallen in April of 1975. Her mother was not allowed to get on the helicopter, but her mother had to get her girls out of the country before the communists took over because their father was an American CIA pilot. The girls grew up as orphans in the U.S., but Lei grew to be a strong, independent woman and a school teacher in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. When she asked us, the Vietnam vets who were visiting her school, if we'd like to go back to Vietnam, 12 of us said yes. She took us on an amazing trip back in time when we were just kids, fighting a war in a foreign land where we did not understand the culture or language. She established an itinerary that made sure we visited the area where every veteran had served. This was an extraordinary story that had to be recorded and told. That's why I wrote the book, Benji. On the first page of the book, I dedicate it to the 58,202 service members whose name are on the black wall of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and to the Vietnam vets who were disparaged or abused by American citizens when they returned home from the war.
Chuck, listen, man, I'm so glad that you wrote this because there's a really skewed perception of the Vietnam War especially, and we're going to dive into that in more detail in just a bit. But first and foremost, man, if you had the opportunity to take one person from your past, either a fellow soldier, a protester, a family member even, back to Vietnam with you, who would it have been and why?
Benji, as a matter of fact, I did take one person from my past back to Vietnam.
Oh.
It was my wife. It was my wife for more than 50 years, Joanne K. Bechtel. She was with me for most of my 35 years that I wore an Army uniform. She had her own profession as a high school chemistry teacher, but I have to admit, she also did most of the child rearing for our 2 kids because I was off someplace checking training or going to military schools. She enriched the trip for me and my fellow vets. By the second day, the vets were calling her G.I. Joan. She is still trim and fit and really enjoyed the trip and was anxious to see what I had experienced in Vietnam. She's my biggest fan and my harshest critic. She also provided input to the book, and she helped me edit it.
Listen, Chuck, that old adage rings true, man. Behind every great man is an even better woman. And I'm a firm believer of a living testament to that, because I've been blessed to have been married to an incredible woman. And it sounds like you've aligned yourself wonderfully with the perfect partner in crime as well. People, listen, I'm telling you, man, you got to head on over to Amazon, ColonelChuckBechtel.com. Pick up copies of Sent to War, Returning for Peace, My Reconciliation with the Vietnam War. This is an eye-opening memoir that is going to showcase the Vietnam War, but it's also going to showcase a lot of what the soldiers not only went through, but their journey through overcoming a lot of the horrors. And I think that's where so much of the power lies in this book, is it's not just another depiction of a war. Yes, it has that. But I think so often war is almost glorified in a way. And for those of us that haven't been on the front lines, we can see it from a very skewed perception. And I love what Chuck has done by comprising this book, because, listen, it's showing his perspective, but it's going to put things into such a wonderful light and such a clear perspective for you. So I'm telling you, man, add it to your shelf. Focusing now on a shifting perspective, that's where I want to go next, Chuck, because, listen, man, I think that there was something very interesting that happened here, and I want to hear it from you, because obviously as a young soldier fighting in the Vietnam War, you're heading there and you have an understanding of the word quote unquote enemy, right? Because you're fighting this and you have to look at the people on the other side as that. I'm curious, man, how did that understanding of enemy shift from your time where you were in combat to your return trip decades later?
It shifted completely. When I was there as an infantry officer in 1968, we were at war with North Vietnam, and the Viet Cong in South Vietnam had infiltrated the South Vietnamese government. One of the greatest challenges for U.S. soldiers in South Vietnam was determining friend from foe. In 2022, our trip back, we were warmly greeted by Vietnamese in the north and south of Vietnam. One of the most positive experiences on the trip was visiting Mr. Nguyen Hong My, a former North Vietnamese MiG-21 pilot. Mr. Hong My shot down one of our F-4 jets, piloted by John Stiles. He received the highest award for that, the Order of Ho Chi Minh. Hong My was later shot down by an F-4 pilot by the name of Dan Cherry. Dan Cherry was promoted to brigadier general and went back to Vietnam after the war and found Hong My. And he brought him back to the United States to meet John Stiles. So it had gone full circle. The pilot he shot down, the pilot that shot him down, the three of them, and they became friends. General Cherry wrote a book. The book was titled, Once We Were Enemies, Now We Are Friends. That book, written in English, was lying on the coffee table of Hong Mi's house only a few feet from me as I was sitting there looking at him. I felt a closer bond with this man, who was once my enemy, than I did American citizens who were waiting at U.S. airports to disparage and abuse American citizens returning home from the killing fields of Vietnam.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so listen, Chuck, I want to transition now, man, because I think a really key component to this, and something that goes far beyond your time on the battlefield, is the perception that a lot of citizens here in America held towards soldiers, especially in the Vietnam War. As I mentioned at the top, it was a very unpopular war. And in your book, you recount both combat and especially the homecoming. And that's where I want to focus on next. I'm curious to know, from your perspective, which was harder to revisit emotionally, the violence of the war or the rejection from society afterward?
Benji, I was well trained by the Army. I had 8 weeks of special infantry after basic training. And I went through infantry officer candidate school for 22 weeks. After that, I went on to a very grueling Army Ranger school. I was highly trained. I knew what was going to happen on the battlefield. I had probably as much training as I could. And I did my job. I cared for my soldiers, the ones that were killed, the ones that were blown apart. And I did the job. The job wasn't going back. The job wasn't in combat. I spent 35 years in an Army uniform. But how can any soldier prepare to be disparaged or abused by his countrymen when he returns home from the battlefield? I write in the prologue of my book that the period of the Vietnam War was one of the most shameful periods in American history, only behind slavery in the way we treated our indigenous Americans. President used an unfair draft to man the war effort. Wealthy kids were sent to college where they got off with a college deferment, while the war became a battle for kids on the lower end of the socio-economic scale. Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, possibly the most despised man in America in the late 60s. In 1965, he initiated Project 100,000. He lowered the mental standards for individuals to enter the military. Their average IQ was 75. These young men were sometimes labeled as McNamara's misfits or McNamara's morons. Of course, it wasn't their fault. It was his. Statistics proved that they were 3 times as likely to die on the battlefield as soldiers with a normal IQ and twice as likely to be court-martialed. By the end of the war, over 500,000 of these young men were dispersed through all the services. In my book, I provide stories of 5 Vietnam vets who were abused by anti-war protesters. One was refused membership in the VFW. The VFW stands for Veterans of Foreign Wars.
Wow.
Another had bags of urine thrown at his bus on the way to an airport to go home. 2 of the vets were spit on. Even older veterans did not always come to the aid of Vietnam veterans. A special veterans organization known as the Vietnam Veterans of America received a federal charter from Congress in 1986. By the way, it was that organization that took us back to Vietnam. Their motto is never again will one generation of veterans forsake another.
Chuck, what surprised you most about returning to Vietnam? All these years later, was there a place or a person that reshaped your perspective entirely?
I would say the overall itinerary set up by Lei Williams was amazing, from Hanoi all the way to the Mekong Delta. But there were 2 particular situations: the visits to the Center for Victims of Agent Orange in Da Nang and the Kin Tong Wheelchair Center in Saigon. Before we left home, we sent money to the Center for Agent Orange victims, and we took school supplies, such as colored pencils and so forth.
Yeah.
These were kids that had been dosed by the Agent Orange. And by the way, Benji, a lot of us, myself included, have pensions for exposure to Agent Orange.
Oh, my goodness.
Agent Orange was a defoliant. It was a carcinogen, caused cancer. My wife, the retired school teacher, went right into the middle of the school children, found an empty seat. She had taken a plastic jar of math manipulatives that looked like children and adults of different colors. The kids went right into it. They start putting these little figures together. And when they were all done with that, they got out pencil and paper, and they started drawing for her like she was a regular teacher. I was never more proud of my wife than at that time. The photo of her sitting in the middle of these kids will always be one of my favorites. The Grace Church in Willow Street, Pennsylvania, sent enough money to the Kin Tong Wheelchair Center in Saigon to build 6 wheelchairs. Some of the people never had a wheelchair. They waited for us to get there before they took their chairs. One old man used to walk on his hands using 6-inch blocks of wood. It was tremendously satisfying to be there to help the people in Vietnam, not to hurt them.
Yeah.
The war killed about 2 million Vietnamese, both North and South, combatants and civilians, including women and small children. Benji, we always look at the war from our side. 58,000 killed, 5 or 6 times that many wounded. The amount of damage we did to people and places over there was horrendous.
Chuck, listen, man, There are so many questions that I would love to ask you, and people, listen, man, I could sit here, I could talk to Chuck for hours. There is so much information to be found, but also the conversation is so layered. It is so nuanced. I think what I want to close out with this, right? And I hope that it's the right one to close out with because it really is so valuable for me. But I know my listening audience, man, and they're going to be like, well, Benji, you could have asked this and that. It's always something that's left off. But I love your title, Chuck, because the duality of it exposes so much, right? Because it right there and very poignantly, it suggests a journey from war to peace. I want to know, was there a single moment when you realized you needed reconciliation, or was it potentially a gradual awakening?
Benji, the Vietnam War divided our country like it had not been divided since the Civil War. I recently spoke to a dust-off pilot. He's a guy who flew into the battlefield to get our wounded. Pretty tough job. And while he was doing that in Vietnam, he had a younger brother, who was the leader of the anti-war demonstration in his high school. This is my book, but our entire country went through a reconciliation with the Vietnam War. It was the first war where the U.S. citizens attacked their own warriors.
Yeah.
Which had to be very rewarding for Ho Chi Minh and his fellow communist leaders.
Mm-hmm.
The United States, the undisputed world's great superpower, lost a war to a third world country where they were still plowing their fields with water buffalo. We proved to our potential enemies that we were far from invincible. The lost war affected our psyche of our country. The reconciliation I wrote about was more with citizens who disparaged American citizens in the Vietnamese. There were also a host of anti-war songs and movies that veterans had to deal with. I'm very critical of them in my book. I list songs and I list movies. My wife at one point said, "Why do we keep going to these movies?" And I said, "Because I think eventually we're going to get to one that's decent." And we did. The title of that movie was We Were Soldiers Once. It was taken from an outstanding book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, which was a bestseller. The lost Vietnam War was a manifestation of the inept leadership in Washington, and generals sitting in Pentagon deserve their share of the credit for it also.
Love that.
Thank you, Benji.
Listen, Chuck, thank you, man. People, like I mentioned, the conversation has just begun. There is so much to be found within the confines and on the pages of this book. So first and foremost, let me say it again, okay? Remember, it's Amazon. It's ColonelChuckBechtel.com. Pick up copies of Sent to War, Returning for Peace today, because this book speaks volumes not only of just one individual's journey, but really of so many soldiers that unfortunately never get a chance to have their stories heard. What I really love about this book and what it can showcase, man, it proves that some wars don't end when the fighting stops. They end when we choose to make peace with our past. Follow me here for a second, because listen, if Chuck's journey teaches us anything, it's that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about returning with courage to the places that broke you and rewriting the ending. So to everybody out there listening, man, I hope we honor veterans not just with gratitude, but with the space to heal, with grace to be heard, and with the commitment to build a world where coming home means more than just survival. This book can truly help open our eyes to so much, but remember, it's one person's perspective, it's one person's story, but it embodies so many voices that unfortunately get lost to time, that never get told and get buried. Head on over there, pick up your copies today. Chuck, listen, man, thank you for, I really do mean, thank you for turning your pain into a roadmap for peace, because it's going to help so many others. And you are a true embodiment of a person of distinction. And it was an absolute honor and such a pleasure. Continue your fight. Continue with this fantastic work. And again, thank you for being a guest with us through People of Distinction.
I thought you did a super job. You're very smooth. I see why you do what you do. Thank you very much, Benny. It was a real pleasure.